In this video, we're going to look at solving equations in the form ax squared plus c equals 0. Now, you might recognize ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 as a quadratic equation, and what I'm going to look at in this video is specifically examples where the b value is 0, and so we don't have an x term. So, for example, let's say I have the equation x squared minus 4 equals 0. Okay, so in this case, the a value is 1, and the c value is negative 4. Notice there's no b value here. All right, well, you may have learned certain techniques. You could use the quadratic formula on this. You could use factoring, and maybe I'll show factoring and show the quadratic formula, but really the easiest thing to do for these kind of problems is to subtract the c from both sides. So in our case, we're going to add 4. We're going to add the opposite, and we're going to get x squared equals 4. And then take the square root of both sides. Now, if there was a number in front of this x, we would want to divide it over. But there's no number there, so we'll just take the square root, and we end up with x equals plus or minus 2, and we're done. All right, so generally, if I come over here and finish what I was doing over here, I would get a times x squared equals, and then I moved my c to the other side. It doesn't, if c is positive, this is going to be a negative. If c is negative, this is going to be a positive. So, this is just going to be some value over here. It doesn't mean that it's going to be negative because there's a minus there. And then divide both sides by a, and so you're going to get x squared equals some number over here now, whatever this value is. And then you can take the square root of both sides, and you'll get x equals plus or minus whatever number that is. Square root of whatever the number that is in there. All right, super easy, super fast. Let's do another one real quick, and then we'll go back and see how this works for factoring. So let's say we have something like 3x squared minus 27. No, that's too nice. Let's do 24 equals 0. Okay, so maybe if you think you know how to do it, pause the video and see if you can give it a whirl. All right, so what we want to do first is add the 24. Basically, what we're trying to do is isolate the x squared, get the x squared by itself. Divide by 3. So then we get x squared equals 8. Then take the square root of both sides. And so we have x equals plus or minus square root of 8. And remember, we can simplify the square root of 8 because it is 4 times 2. And the square root of 4 can come out. The square root of 4 is 2, so I'm going to have that come out in front of the square root. And my final answer is positive or negative 2 times the square root of 2. Now this really only works if there's no b value here, if there's no x, right? X term. If I have something like 3x squared plus 7x minus 24 equals 0, I can't use this technique because I can't get my x's on one side. I can't isolate a single x term. I mean, I could move my 24 over, but these are not like terms, so I can't combine them together. I'm kind of stuck. So in this case, I'd have to use the quadratic formula or factoring. Probably this doesn't factor because I just made it up, but you could check and see. Okay, so this is a very specific type of problem. So let's go back to this x squared minus 4 equals 0 problem. And just to see, just so how you can see, I think this is always good for your brain to do things in different ways. You could also solve this by factoring. If I factor this, it's the difference of squares. And I get x minus 4, x plus 4. And then I would set each, oh, wrong, try that again, right? Did you catch me? X plus 2, x minus 2, how about that? And then I would set each factor equal to 0. And add 2 to both sides, subtract 2 from both sides. I get the same answer. X is positive or negative 2. If you love the quadratic formula, you could also solve this using the quadratic formula. I don't know why you would. Maybe just for fun. See how many ways you can do something? So my A value is 1, my B value is 0, and my C value is 4. Let's give it a whirl here. Opposite of B, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A, watch your negatives, times C is a negative 4, all over 2 times A. So we get 0 plus or minus the square root of 4 times 4 is 16, minus a negative is a positive 16 over 2. The square root of 16 is 4, divided by 2 is plus or minus 2. There you go, all right? Now, which method do you like better? I agree. This method right here is the fastest way to do the problem when you don't have a B term in there, okay? Easy, easy, easy. Now, I want to show you one other type of problem that's in this form, but a little bit different. All right, so in this form, instead of just having an x here, maybe we've got x plus or minus something. So it's going to look like in this form, except in these parentheses, we might have something besides x. I think for my first example, I'll just make this a value 1. So let's say I've got something like x minus 2 squared equals, and I'll just move that c value to the other side, I'll just pick something like 5. Now, if you have an equation in this form, you can also use the technique that I showed you. Instead of just an x squared, we have an x minus 2 squared. But I can do the same thing here, and I can take the square root of both sides. This square root and this square, they undo each other. If you square something and square root it, you end up right back where you started. And then on this side, you just have to remember to put your plus or minus square root 5. Then to finish, all I have to do is isolate x by adding 2 to both sides. And I get x equals 2 plus or minus root 5. That's the answer. Pretty cool. X could be 2 plus root 5, or x could be minus root 5. 2 plus root 5 or 2 minus root 5. Now, if you wanted to do this the long way, which again, I don't know why you would, but I know a lot of students that would because they're not really sure about this process over here. You'd have to take this x minus 2 times x minus 2 and FOIL it out. Then subtract the 5 over. And then that doesn't factor, so you'd have to use the quadratic formula. This is fun, isn't it? B squared minus 4 times A times C. Oh, this can be so much fun. 2 times A. So I get 4 plus or minus square root. That's minus a negative becomes a plus. 16 plus 4 is 20. You think this is going to come out to be that? Well, let's keep going. Remember, 20 is 4 times 5. 20 is 4 times 5, so I can take the square root of 4 to be 2, square root 5. And then if I divide each of these terms by 2, I get 2 plus or minus root 5. Look at that, same answer I got over there. Which way do you think's easier? I agree. All right, so if you see something that's more in this form, something squared equals some number, if you can get it into this form right here, it doesn't matter what's in here. Sometimes I like to say this can be a glob. This can be whatever you want, any old glob of stuff. You can take the square root of both sides, and whatever's in these parentheses will be equal to positive or negative the square root of whatever number is over here. All right, let's try another one of these. It's got a few more steps to it. Remember, what we're trying to do is get glob squared equals a number. Do I have that here? Glob squared equals a number. Close, but I've got this 3 here. I need to get rid of that first. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Now I've got some kind of glob of stuff in here. Squared equals 4. So now I can take the square root of both sides, and I end up with 2x minus 1. The square and the square root undo each other. And I got plus or minus the square root of 4, which is 2. All right, let's finish this out. Now I need to isolate this x. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And that gives me 2x equals positive or negative 2 plus 1. I'm just going to keep this positive or negative 2 with me for a while till I get to the end. Okay, let's write it up here. 2x equals positive or negative 2 plus 1. You see what we're going to do next? We're going to divide both sides by 2. So x has two different answers. One answer is positive 2 plus 1 over 2. The other answer is negative 2 plus 1 over 2. So my first answer is 3 over 2, which is 1.5. You could write it like that if you like. Or negative 1/2. Those are the two answers. The other way to do it, you'd have to FOIL this out, distribute the 3 minus the 12, see what you could do with that. Okay, so hopefully you start recognizing this form. I'm going to show 2 more examples and have you try them. Pause the video and try them. We'll look at the solutions, and then I think we've got it. All right, take a look at these 2 problems. Write them down. Pause the video. Solve those using the square root of both sides technique that we've covered in this video. All right, let's see how you did. First thing we want to do here is isolate this x squared. So we're going to add 60 to both sides. And we get 5x squared equals 60. Now we're going to divide both sides by 5 to get that x squared by itself, so we can take the square root of both sides. That's 12. All right, now we got the x squared isolated, so we're going to do our square root. Now I start thinking about if 12 has any factors that are perfect squares, which it does, 4. So I can take that 4 out of there. The 3's got to stay in jail because he's not perfect yet. So we're going to keep that 3 inside. The 4 comes out as a new person, namely 2. And I forgot my plus or minus. There we go. Let's put that plus or minus in there, and we have our solutions. All right, let's see how we did on this one. This one, we need to get rid of this negative 3 first and isolate our glob squared. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. And I have something squared equals a number. Now I can take the square root of both sides. And on the left-hand side, I'm left with x plus 5. On the right-hand side, I have plus or minus 5. Only one more thing left to do to get x by itself. So x has 2 answers. This is where I might split them up and look at them. I've got positive 5 minus 5, or x could be negative 5 minus 5. So my 2 answers are 0 or negative 10, which some instructors might like you to write in set notation like that. So it might be a fun exercise for you to take this equation from B, FOIL this all out, distribute the 3, set it equal to 0, and use a different technique to solve it and see that you come out with the same thing. All right, I hope this video helped. When you see something in this form, you want to use the easiest possible way to solve it, and isolating and taking the square root is the way to do it.